Crane assemblers must be fearless.
The exciting thing is when you come out of the lee of the building, that's when you know how the wind blows. To assemble is no fun.
Plasterers combine craftsmanship with fine art.
I want everyone who sees one of my objects to say, wow, that looks great.
Track layers work when others are asleep.
The first night shift is the worst. You don't sleep much the day before.
To slave away on construction sites is a badass job. Hanover, Saturday evening. In the capital of Lower Saxony, track layers are turning night into day. In the middle of the city, the tracks of the light rail system have to be renewed. On weekdays, more than 600,000 people use the light rail system. It's the backbone of public transportation. Long downtimes are not an option. Holger Nitzboy is a column leader.
It's not nice, but we've been doing it for ages.
Not in this case. The new track construction has been underway since 8 p.m. yesterday. Since then, Hanoverians have had to switch to rail replacement services at this point until Tuesday morning at 5. Then rail traffic should be running again.
We have to be ready. Everything has to go in because the OAT are coming tomorrow. They want to set anchors. Then we have to drill. Then everything has to be in place. Otherwise, it costs a lot of money, so we have to make sure it gets done.
A so-called power weekend for the track layers. Holger Nitzboy and his team still have 9 hours of shift ahead of them. That's not possible without sufficient preparation.
I got up at 3 p.m. today, and then I have to eat something decent first. It's actually my lunch, because breakfast doesn't exist in that sense.
And all of that in the pouring rain. After all, the temperatures are about 10 degrees. Yesterday, the track layers removed the old rails. They were worn out after almost 20 years. Since the afternoon, the men have been installing the new tracks. This requires a lot of muscle power.
Against it. Good.
However, muscle power alone isn't enough. Precision is just as important.
It has to be pretty accurate for the welders too, because afterwards, once it's welded, you can't regulate it anymore. So it has to be pretty precise now. That's what we're doing now. We only have +2 millimeters. Minus does not exist here. So it must be very accurate.
The rails are not laid on a ballast bed here, but on a concrete slab. However, this has to be extended because a switch with a longer tongue device will be installed later.
Now we pull the meter, Holger. We measured it earlier on.
Track construction foreman Alex Schmidt has been doing the job for 32 years.
I need more concrete.
At this point, the men have to do some more work.
If the concrete is installed too high, then it's not nice, because nothing works. If it's installed too low, it doesn't matter. You can always compensate with other materials. But if it's installed too high, then you have to quickly shovel out a little bit, as long as it's still possible, or just mill it off afterwards. But so far, we still have it almost under control.
The track layers use the excavator to remove the excess concrete. After 6 hours, the concrete would be too solid. The so-called slab track is significantly more complex and expensive to produce than a classic ballast bed. In return, however, the concrete bed is supposed to last longer. A construction site in the middle of the city. Despite all the adversity, Alex Schmidt also sees the positive side.
We're lucky now. Here in Hanover, it's actually very well illuminated. Sometimes we're on the road where there is no illumination. We then have just our headlamps, flashlights and so on. Or we try to put it out with mobile light giraffes when the construction site is bigger. But mostly we have our headlamps on, and that's it. That's fine. It's not like it doesn't work that way. Of course, it would be nicer if everything was really brightly illuminated, but this isn't Make-A-Wish.
Disadvantages of the solid track: more driving noise. In addition, corrections are hardly possible afterwards if Alex Schmidt and his team don't work with millimeter precision.
Not them. A digger can do it. Let's just put them in here. When they don't sleep during the day, like these guys, when they don't sleep, of course, it's a pain. No, it's all fine. You have to get used to it. I think the tiredness will set in later at 3 or 4, but then that's it. And at 6, we'll call it a day.
There is still a long way to go until then. In the middle of Hamburg, the Millantor Stadium. Venue of the cult club FC St. Pauli. Popular meeting place before kick-off, the old concrete coat of arms in front of the stadium. Florian Hinrich takes care of the almost 80-year-old emblem because it has seen better times and should be beautiful again until the next match. Florian is a plasterer by passion. Plasterers not only work with stucco, but also with concrete, like here.
There's a sharpened surface on it. There are curves, a lot. There are letters. There are many small corners and angles. There are very beautiful things on it, where you have to look at the details and work very precisely. And that's a challenge, to get it back the way it was made in 1946. That's also fun. Also considering the aspect that other people see it and always look at it. That's nice.
Scarification is the corrugations on the surface of the concrete, an ancient stone masonry technique that originated in the 15th century. Plasterers are considered to be fine masters of construction. Especially in the Renaissance and Baroque periods, they were considered as much artists as sculptors or painters.
In our industry, there are a lot of girls who would like to become plasterers, because somehow everyone always thinks that plasterers work in churches and only do small things and a little bit of art and stuff. There is about 5% of artistic work involved, true, but most of it's really hard work. But there are a lot of girls who are also good at it. You just have to cope with construction sites and a bit of dirt and noise and dust, but not everyone can do it.
Before Florian can spruce up the old part, the old layers of paint have to come off. This is the only way he can create a smooth surface. The coat of arms is made of reinforced concrete and breaks from the inside.
You can hear it quite well. There's a cavity in it, there's a crack in it somewhere, water has run in. Then the frost came and blew it up, and that's why this has to be removed and reattached.
Everything that's old and loose has to come off so that the new material that the plasterer applies has a good base. To do this, Florian has to get to grips with the old work of art a little more brutally. The plasterer likes to work on such old objects. Sometimes he experiences exciting surprises.
We've already found so many things. Old bicycles that were mangled or cut apart and then just taken the bars in. We very often find newspapers that have been stuffed into cavities to save material, and then just 1-2 centimeters of new material was put over it. And you think all the time, why is it so hollow? Suddenly you're holding an old newspaper from the 1900s.
Florian Hinrichs was born into a family of plasterers. His father and grandfather already worked as plasterers. In addition to stucco work, plasterers also do drywall and plaster, for example, facades or interior walls.
It's dusty, I'm telling you. It's not everyone's cup of tea. But you can wear masks and all kinds of things. You just can't prevent dust.
This job is a matter of the heart for Florian. As a Hamburger, the plasterer cheers and suffers with FC St. Pauli. But not only that, making old things shine in new splendor gives him pleasure. The old concrete coat of arms was given to the club in 1946 by another club. Florian wants to keep as much as possible in its original condition.
The thing is broken, of course. The iron has to come out here. You can see that it has become wet and rusted over decades. That's why it's cracked off. And now we have to take out the old iron, put in new iron. Then the parts are put together and back on. And then it holds again.
The job requires a lot of experience and concentration. After all, the plasterer doesn't want to break more than absolutely necessary. At every point, therefore, the craftsman must proceed with great caution. He takes the parts home with him.
This is the kind of beautiful workshop work that you also have. Then you can sit down for an hour in the evening, put it together a bit, do a bit of a puzzling. That's relaxing. You can sit down. And then you can bring it back here, put it together and get a great result.
Although Florian is still doing the rough preparatory work, he would like to start restoration work in some places. Where a particularly large amount of material is missing, the plasterer has to make several work stages. Above all, the scarifications require a sure instinct.
You can't do it with a blade. You have to do everything with the hand and with a rubber. So you can't build a mold that you can then use for it. It's all actually by hand. Every scarfing, every strip individually.
Now a good eye is needed. This fine work is a nice change from the coarser work with flax and chisel. A little later, the plasterer has to interrupt his work. It's supposed to rain. Florian builds a temporary roof because the rain not only makes the work unpleasant, but is also poison for the material. Shortly thereafter, the restoration can continue. 3 kilometers to the east lies a completely different construction site. In the middle of the station district, a new hotel is to rise skyward. A 60-meter high crane is needed for this. A case for crane fitter Anthony Natai and his colleagues. The first crane team is already there.
This is our work, so every day the same. Up, down, repair. What usually doesn't fit is the weather. If it's windy, then it's not so cool, but otherwise it's fine.
The crane should be completed by the evening. A total of 9 tower sections have to be placed on top of each other before the jib and counter jib complete the crane. Because things are so tight here, each part is divided only when it is to be installed. Marcel Koch makes sure that the crane parts arrive safely. After unloading, the crane chains are reattached once again to lift the component vertically. Colleague Thomas Juhl prepares the 8 bolts with which the first tower joint will be fixed immediately. A construction site in the middle of the city, not an everyday occurrence for the fitters.
Sure, of course, the responsibility always contributes to it, especially in the middle of Hamburg with pedestrians, cyclists and other road users. You always have to keep an eye on things. Also with the long parts, responsibility always plays a big role. And the mutual trust of colleagues and telecrane drivers. It all comes with it.
Foundation and bolts are ready. 3 men, 4 corners. The fitters take delivery at the first tower section, which is hovered in place by telecrane. The 10-meter high part weighs 4.9 tons. It fits. Mommermeister hammers in the bolts that fix the crane. This is hard work.
It gets more strenuous with each tower push, but afterwards there are other bolts that are pulled with a hydraulic device. That's a bit different in terms of handling, but then it also goes in turn that everyone knocks in a few bolts.
For Mommer, Crane construction is now routine. He knows that the safety of others depends on his work.
It's automatic when you go up the crane for maintenance or something, that you check if all the cotter pins are still there. Has anything been taken away as a souvenir by people who walked on the crane or something? But as I said, you automatically look when you move somewhere on the machine.
Everything went smoothly with the first tower section. Will it continue like this? Momme and Thomas get into position for tower section number 2. The way up is still relatively comfortable in the 2-meter wide tower sections. Later, it gets narrower. After a good half hour, the second tower section arrives. Thomas is optimistic about the further assembly.
We are quite well in time now, yes. There was no extra ballast that we had to do today, so we continue directly with the towers now. After that comes the time when the jib, counter jib, revolving stage and so on comes. Then you have to make sure that you get everything prepared and that it actually goes up in one go. That's the plan. Things are progressing, but at the moment it still looks quite good.
But for that to continue, the weather has to play along. At the moment, the conditions are perfect for the assembly, but the wind is supposed to pick up later. That could become a problem. In the worst case, the man would even have to abandon the installation. To be able to do the physically challenging job, the fitters have to be fit. Up here, the bolts are pulled hydraulically. This makes assembly a little easier for the workers.
There are colleagues who are still on the road at age 65, but of course it's very unlikely in this job. The knees will give way or their hip joint or something. I know many colleagues who are 50 and can no longer do it. There are also other colleagues who are super fit and who climb up there even at 65. People are different, and of course I hope that I'll be able to keep it up at some point, but I still have a few more years to go.
Today, Thomas still has a lot of effort ahead of him. But the view becomes a bit more beautiful with every step up the tower. Piece by piece, the monster grows upward. So far, everything is going smoothly. Hopefully, it will continue like this, because only then will the crane assemblers reach their goal and finish the crane today. While the crane fitters continue to build upwards, work is progressing horizontally in Hanover.
Too much. Wait.
Each rail has a number that matches another. The track laths hold the rails together until the welders arrive. Tonight, the track layers have to get busy, because any delay during the night upsets the schedule of the day shift.
Good. We're now a bit behind schedule, about 6 hours. We're also catching up a bit now, but not all of it. Let's see what the day shift is doing. But as I said, we're under a bit of pressure now.
The men work in 2 shifts of 25 men each. Today, a switch is installed. This is particularly complicated because of the associated electronics. For the installation of the 5-ton switch, the track builders use a so-called 2-way excavator that can travel both on the road and on rails.
Good.
Holger Nitzboy has been with the company for 29 years. Night shifts are always part of the job.
Yeah, the sleep is actually different. When you're supposed to sleep during the day, it's always stupid. To sleep at night is simply different. During the day, I don't know, you don't get your normal rest. Then you have the brightness. It's just the way it is. I prefer working during the day, but well, that's the way it is. We can't choose.
The colleagues with the concrete are making good progress, although they have to rework again and again, because the work is complicated. In order to insert the switch precisely, it comes together with the concrete into the track.
If we were to slide too far along the platform, then of course the train would bang against it at some point. We don't want that either. 87 good? 2 millimeters? That is good. I'll put in the wood now. It's fine.
The track layers spread water on the fresh concrete. This is necessary because they will have to smooth the material again later. The fact that the switch is longer than the old part makes installation particularly complicated. This is because the track builders have to extend the old concrete slab. Playing with the concrete is extremely tedious. The track layers have to readjust again and again. Alex doesn't let himself get rattled.
I rebuilt this entire process 25 years ago with the Capman company. I started with the company back then, here in Hanover. We've rebuilt the whole thing before. And what's life like? Never say never. You always meet twice. And now we have it. Here, Mirko. Over here, over here. Too far, Thomas. Thomas? Where's he going?
Foreman Alex Schmidt has done many night shifts in his professional life.
Yeah, at my age I don't really need it, but it needs to be done. It doesn't happen all the time. To be honest, I can't complain. It's my first weekend this year, my first night shift.
The men can only keep their schedule if the required material is delivered on time. The first longer rail part arrives. However, the track builders have to take an extremely tight curve to get the part to the desired location. Not so easy with a length of 30 meters. In between, cars also want to pass through. Foreman Holger Nitzboy keeps an overview.
Mirko, drive in a little further.
Come.
Finally, the track layers have mastered the tight curve. Now the rail still has to be installed. Precision work. Because the men have to place the giant part with millimeter precision. Otherwise it won't fit on the other rail. Holger Nitzboy keeps track of everything.
Go out in between.
The foreman is skeptical.
Hang on, something's wrong here. Everything has to go further over there. Søren, this needs to come half a meter over here. Look where the drainage is. Everything further over here.
It doesn't fit like that yet.
Over there in front. Here again. And a little bit here. Right here. Wait a sec, leave it. Something's wrong here.
Holger Nitzboy sees at first glance somehow the rail parts do not fit together properly. But why? A new working day begins for plasterer Florian Hinrichs on St. Pauli. Today he wants to reinstate the coat of arms parts that he has repaired and reworked. Securing the construction site every day is tedious but necessary.
Definitely. Because unfortunately there are bullies everywhere who either want to break something or unfortunately also steal. And of course defacement. If someone breaks the coat of arms, it would be a disaster. And we don't want that. Not as long as it's not finished. It's probably going to happen anyway, that someone scribbles on it again. But for as long as possible, we don't want that.
Hinrichs prepares his worksite. The Hamburg sky shows itself more merciful today than last time.
Today there's decent weather, so we don't need the rain cover anymore. And besides, we have a home game tomorrow. I'll have to secure the construction site anyway so that there's no danger to anyone from a loose sheet. And, of course, people should also see what has happened so far. A few thousand will come here tomorrow. And then, of course, I would like to show my work so far.
Florian Hinrichs wastes no time. He still has to get a lot done so that the stadium visitors have something to see tomorrow.
Now let's fix some tile glue to glue the part back on there.
To mix the glue, Florian uses the so-called plaster iron.
That's actually called a plastering iron. And since we do a lot of plastering work, smaller things, they come in all different sizes. Pointed and springy, rigid. You're actually working with it the whole time. And that's why this is actually the most important tool that we always have on hand.
In order for the adhesive to hold well, the plasterer must first clean the part. Remaking the piece was not an option for Florian.
I could also have cleaned it out completely from scratch, but that's not the point, because the first priority is to preserve it and then restore it, so that it looks like it did before, let's say, 1946. I don't want to do the math now. That is the top priority. And that's also a bit of an art. You have to have the patience for it, the eye for it. And not everyone can do that. You have to have learned it.
Now comes the adhesive. Here the experienced plasterer proceeds with a good sense of proportion.
As I said, not too much because superfluous material disturbs. It should now just suck up nicely, and the rest we'll do once it's on.
Autumn weather in Hamburg. It is still warm enough for these activities. In winter, the work becomes much more difficult.
I don't really like to wear gloves when I'm doing this kind of work, because you simply lose feeling, even through these thin gloves. And if you want to make smaller edges, then you need feeling in your fingers. That's important. If it's colder than 5 degrees, I also wear a glove. Or, as I said, for work where you can injure yourself, which is dangerous, where you need personal protective equipment.
Fortunately, Florian can work without gloves today, because now the plasterer needs a lot of feeling. Florian makes the edges beautiful again. Fine work. Many of his activities are much rougher. For example, new balcony brackets on facades.
Such a thing weighs, I'd say, from 120 kilos. If it's full concrete, if it's fully cast, then it can even go up to 300 kilos. We have already had consoles weighing 300 kilos. And of course that's really difficult, especially because you're standing on normal facade scaffolding where you have no space. It's not without danger. One wrong step and you have the console in your hands with a couple of men, and you have to bring it up there under the balcony slab. You have to fasten it, so that's extreme. But of course it's also great from an optical point of view when you see it like that. Not such a stupid balcony slab, but there's a beautiful ornament underneath, which looks great.
Florian is making good progress. If he continues like this, the fans can come. Work is also progressing very well on the crane construction site. The tower is already fully assembled. Next comes the cab. Slowly, the 5.8-ton component is lifted up. Anthony Natai runs the crane cab from below, making sure nothing happens. But the experienced crane fitter knows that things only get really tricky after the cab.
Only when the boom and counterboom goes up. That's the most work. But otherwise, the rest is just like Lego for adults.
Then the cabin sits on the tower and the man can take care of the boom. It is 46 meters long and was therefore delivered in individual parts. The fitters assemble it on the ground and then want to lift it in one piece. Not so easy.
So here it's a bit narrow and dangerous due to the trees, and sometimes you have a gust of wind, then it turns away at once. That's why we always have to secure with a tether.
The wind could become a problem today because slowly a fresh freeze comes up. For the work on the boom, the fitters who had worked on the tower in the morning have also come down again. And so the boom is quickly assembled with many helping hands. Anthony has been a crane fitter for 6 years. The trained industrial mechanic wouldn't want to do anything else. He has already experienced a lot in this time.
We were setting up and suddenly there was a gust of wind. And then the jib slammed into the autocrane and it no longer worked. Then we had to wait until a fitter from Liebherr arrived. Everything was programmed and we continued.
The men start to fit the boom with the hoist rope. During operation, the hoist rope is later guided over a so-called trolley, which runs horizontally on the boom. With so much rope, how do you not get confused?
Yes, there are rope layouts, but you know that off the top of your head. At Siloco, we are single variety. That is, we have only potane, one manufacturer, and for the most part, also always only one type of crane, although different hooks, different cats.
Before the fitters crane the jib, however, the much shorter counter jib first goes up, if the wind permits.
The question is whether we will be able to mount it at all, whether we will be able to guide the parts in the wind so that they can be mounted at the top. Well, first of all, we have the problem that we can't hold it down here, and if up there... One moment. Yes? I'm standing at the leading line. For the moment, it's only the black leading line. I can try to get at least 30 meters more.
No sooner said than done. With the tether extended, the crane part goes up shortly afterwards. Later, the counter jib carries the counterweights, among other things. The men work with 2 holding ropes. There is a reason for that.
You should stand there with your legs spread apart so you don't have to run back and forth with a rope, but that only the one pulls where you have to hold against it.
The workers take turns. Mommermeister, who was still working on the tower in the morning, now guides the counter jib from below with the rope. No less strenuous than the job on the tower either.
After all, we have already reached the assembly position. The exciting thing is always when you come out of the lee of the building, when the load is really caught by the wind. Then you know down here how the wind blows and how it affects the component.
Piece by piece, the men work their way up with the counter jib. In doing so, they must work well together.
Well, the part is now mounted. Now the telecrane is knocked off. Then a ballast stone comes in, and then the boom comes on.
The 3.6-ton concrete weight goes up. 6 more will follow later. Everything has worked well up to this point. The last to follow is the 45-meter boom.
Now it looks very, very good. It was a bit hard here, but now it looks good. I hope it works. But today, no matter what, we have to be ready.
After all, the boom is already in the air, but will the men get it mounted? Work has come to a standstill at the track construction site in Hanover. After the switches have been installed, the first longer rail section should actually follow. But something doesn't fit. Foreman Holger Nitzboy gets to the bottom of it. The track layers are already behind schedule and want to continue working quickly so as not to lose any more time. After getting an overview, Holger goes troubleshooting.
Measuring point found? 236? Yes, possibly. Tape measure? 42, right? 239?
Holger has not yet found the reason why the rail sections don't fit together. The so-called measuring points could provide information about this.
I can't find the measuring points. I can't put this down. I have to check where the measuring points are. Many have already been broken here during the day. Let's put it here somehow. Push it over the back and then we have to look here. If you look in the overhead line, you see how that comes off here. It's fine in the back, but it has to get out of here. I think I have a good sense of proportion, but something's not right here. Somehow I haven't found the error yet, but I will find it. I'll take a look first.
It's 2 o'clock in the morning. The men have been on their feet for 6 hours. While Holger Nitzboy searches for the measuring points, the colleagues first take some refreshment. Alex Schmidt has a clear opinion on this.
Coffee is better than filling your stomach at night.
For the track layers, it's already the second night shift on this power weekend.
The first night shift is actually the worst, because the day before you don't sleep much. That's because you're completely out of a rut where you actually sleep at night. The first day is, what time did I have my low point yesterday? 3 o'clock? Yes, 3 o'clock was the time when I thought I could do with a nap.
Meanwhile, foreman Holger Nitzboy believes he has found the fault.
What? They probably welded the rails together the wrong way. Probably. They are pre-bent. And now, of course, we have a counterbend. If they are welded together upside down, we naturally have a counterbend. That means we now have to cut them open again, turn them, and then weld them back together, if that's the case.
Later, it turns out, only 2 tracks have been swapped, which have not yet been welded together. Thanks to Holger's trained eye, a major mistake can be prevented and important time saved. The track layers are finished for the day. They didn't quite achieve their goal for this night.
I'm on night shift until Wednesday morning, and then I do a big change. I have the day and the night off, and then I start again during the day. And that's always quite nice.
However, the track layers have made up for lost time 2 nights later. The first train leaves at 4:30 a.m. on the dot. Plasterer Florian Hinrichs is very well on time. 2 things are particularly important in his work.
Accuracy and precision. I want to restore the edges now. And everywhere I reach with the material, I have to work over it again. That means I'm now trying to produce the edges and corners so precisely that I don't have too many work steps to get other material out, but that it's in there where it belongs, where I want it to be.
The plasterer estimated 3 weeks for the part. Not much, because the painstaking detail work takes time. Before he could start his work, the coat of arms got a complex color cleaning. Florian enjoys this fine work. Some tools he has built himself. Partly, he just works with his hands.
People, especially trainees, don't like to work with their hands. They should always use tools. But every now and then, there are actually places you can't get at. We do have special tools, small tools, but every now and then you can't get at them, and then you have to use your fingers a bit. And then you always put cream on in the evening so that your hands don't get so dry.
Florian Hinrichs has been a plasterer for 25 years. Often his work is very long, because plasterers have to make many operations that build on each other. Plastering, cutting edges, rubbing. The material he brings in has to tighten first so that he can process it further. A game of patience.
It always depends on the timing. The plasterer says the material determines the break when you have a coffee or something. That is the case, because of course I always have to consider humidity, sunlight, and so on. And the material always has a different tightening time. So you can't just go away and say, I'll do it later. Instead, you always have to stay on site and say, well, now I can take a short break, if at all. But that rarely happens, because you're always on the go. Because if you're always plastering something, then you always have something to rub again. And that goes on until the day is over.
The last thing Florian does is to take care of the numbers and letters that he pasted today. There he first does some rough repair work. On the other side, he's already further along. He is curious to see how his work is received by the soccer fans.
That's always a popular meeting place before the game. My goal is to get the one side finished so that it looks good. And people say, ah, this is how it should look when it's finished. That's the other side now. And this side, where we glued the parts back on today and where I'm doing the rough touch-ups right now, I'm saving that for next week. And then they can be happy about it in 2 weeks when the next home game is here, because that's when it should all be finished.
Until then, there is still a lot to do. But for the moment, Florian is already very satisfied. Whether the fans feel the same way?
Not only the fans. Anyone who sees one of my objects that I've ever worked on, I want them to say, oh, that looks great. Wow, man, that you can make something like that out of something so old. That's important to me. I don't want people to say that anyone can do that. And insofar, the claim is there that people come by and say, nice, great, he's done a good job. And for that I like to work, and with my heart. And that's why it's important to me, what other people say and think.
Many details of Florian Hinrichs' work will only be noticed by experts. When the old coat of arms looks like it did on the first day after almost 80 years, it's the overall picture that counts in the end. On the crane construction site, the fitters are on the home stretch. The 45-meter boom is on its way up. But the gusty wind doesn't make it easy for the man. They cannot afford to make any mistakes. Otherwise, they will not be able to mount the component. Or even worse, the fitters could be injured by the 10.6-ton part. Thomas Jahl and Marcel Koch await the component at the top of the tower and direct their colleagues on the ground by radio.
Mama, let it come like this. We're right across the wind, which is about the most unfavorable situation we can have. The problem is, everything that they pull in that direction now, that also comes back again. So, keep pulling up. Keep pulling up. Stop everything.
Again and again, the wind pushes the boom in the wrong direction. The men have to constantly readjust.
Change it. Good.
The fitters don't take a step on the crane without a rope safety device. Nevertheless, the job up here is not without its dangers.
45 meters, you can hardly believe it. That's some attack surface. You see, whenever they pull into the wind. A gust of wind comes up, pushes it away again, and up here you can't get away. You've got your fingers between them too. That's the way it is. and then to mount it is relatively little fun. But since the two of us have known each other for over 6 years, we don't need to talk much.
For about a quarter of an hour, the men struggle with the boom. Then they slowly come into mounting position. Once the boom is in position, the fitters still have to fix it with a solid bolt.
Okay, you down there on the guideline, relax. No more pulling. No more pulling.
Done. The fitters can fasten the bolt. A job in lofty heights. Thomas Juhl was never afraid. The fitter remembers his first time.
Of course, if only a high tower is standing, you notice it. It's shaking. But that was also done with me back then when I started the job. A colleague began to wobble in order to see how I reacted to it. It wasn't really nice, but then again, if you're not scared or even panicked, then everything will be fine.
The boom is in place. Fitter Marcel Koch can loosen the chains of the telecrane. At the end, the crane gets its last counterweights. The fitters have done it again. However, fitter Thomas Juhl remains in a northern German modest mood.
You're glad that you got the steelwork done today. You're happy about it, but I can't really say that I'm proud of it. It's just my work. I'm just satisfied that it's the end of the day, that I can go home, drink my after-work beer, and then the story will be over.
Thomas Juhl and his colleagues have done their job, but for others, the work is just beginning. The crane assemblers have ensured that a new building can be erected here in the coming months.